I'm right here.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to turn presentership over to you so that you can get started with your portion of the webinar.
Sounds great.
Okay, 1 second while I do that.
Hope everyone's having a good morning so far.
Yeah, it's been a little exciting around here, hasn't it, Bill?
Well, it's been very dark around here, but we're good to be up and going again here. So I'm going to close this down. I was doing some tests here. So what we're going to do is we're going to build 2 reports today that I think are going to be the basis for a lot of the encounter reports you might build. And both of the ones we're going to be building today, excuse me, both the ones we're going to be building today are going to be ones that you can build as dealers and give to all your practices. We mentioned some of the stuff with templates gets a little specific, but we know that you guys are going to be wanting to build reports that you can move around practice to practice. So the most common thing you're going to want to do is get the information from an individual encounter. So we're going to build a really basic encounter report to start with, add some patient information to it, and then a second report we're going to tweak a little bit. So we're going to actually start.
I'm just going to slow you down for just a second.
Sure.
You're telling me that the audio is just a little bit garbled. So
okay. Well, I'll do my best to speak slower and a little louder then, and hopefully it'll go through whatever garble is happening. I hope this right here is better. So we're just going to start from complete scratch today. We're going to do a new report. Some of you have done this before. We're going to make it for the encounter this time, just like you would any other report at this point for transactions or patients. We're going to go down to the encounter. Now we're going to choose our fields. There might be reports where you want some other information about the encounter to be included, but for right now we're just going to be looking at the results at the end of the encounter. So the only thing we're going to grab is the chart number, so we know which patient it's attached to, and the chart preview, so we can actually see those results. I encourage you, if you play with it, to look at these other fields and see if there are things that would be useful to you in future reports. So let's go ahead and do that. And then we're not worried about the rest of the steps. We're just going to hit finish. Now right now we have a list of all our encounters and all of the descriptions. Realistically, when you print this out, you're probably going to want to have some patient information, probably at least the name. So that's the only thing we're going to attach to it for right now, is we're going to attach the patient the same way we would in a day sheet or any other report. So we're going to attach the patient to the encounter. And just like most things in the system, the patient is identified by their chart number in both. We're going to choose a left outer join and hit OK. So let's just go ahead and add the patient's first name and last name. And of course, like any other report, if you want to add other information, like their address or their phone number, those are things you can add as well. But today we're just going to add their name. We're probably going to want to sort this by patient so that they're not all mixed together. And why don't we, just for fun, give us the option that if we only wanted to run it for one patient, we can. So we're going to go to our search, and we're going to give the user an option to enter a range of chart numbers. I'm open to questions, but so far we haven't done anything that's encounter specific. So I think you guys are probably familiar with most of these things. Then let's hit OK there. Let's take a quick preview to make sure it's sorting properly. And it looks like it's sorting all our charts there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over, let's put a really quick title in here. That is way too large.
It's only too large for some of us, Bill.
Fair enough.
Earlier.
Going to center it. And this is unrelated to the encounter, but I've talked to a lot of people who don't know this feature exists. You can always center any field or set of fields within the whole band. So if you're over here and you want to look nice on paper, it's going to center it right there. So we're going to do that. Then we're going to group it together by our chart number so that they keep them together. And let's just start a new page for each patient so that if we want to give it to the patient, we have a fresh piece of paper and I have to cut it in the middle. I'm going to put a patient first name and last name. And those of you who are comfortable making calcs to put the first and last names together, you can do that just like any other report. I'm going to keep them separately for simplicity today. So let's just do a preview. It's not going to look like much right now because it's a bunch of names, but let's just make sure there's no errors. Sure enough, John Adams has his page, EBCS test has a page, George Jones, etc. So let's start putting the encounter information in there. In our detail band, we're going to be able to put that encounter information we looked at last week, that's the nicely formatted stuff. And all of that's in this field right here called Chart Preview. For those who are familiar with AirTypes, this is a blob type, which means you can't see it too easily in this design view because it's rich text. So we're going to go over, and instead of the regular variable, this is a rich text variable, something we don't use too often in our program, but we want a data-based one versus a regular one. And we're going to set that to our chart preview. Now, we're going to do a preview, and you're going to notice something right away. It's nice the information came in here, but obviously that's not quite all of the information. And unlike a name, where we know in a last name, probably that's long enough to accommodate any name, these encounters can be very different in length. Some of them can be a couple lines, some of them can be a couple pages. So one of the nice things here is we're going to set this as wide as we want, about the whole page, and then we're going to select this stretch option. What that does is it says if the information goes below where this is traditionally expecting the field to go, it's going to let the chart preview go down until all the information is printed. So let's do that. And sure enough, now for John Q. Adams, we have the location, the allergies, the subjective, any additional coding. We have a nice little summary of their encounter. Now, we haven't taken a lot of their statistics and everything in here. We've basically just brought up a summary of their encounter, which I think is something that is going to be probably more commonly requested than a lot of the other individual specifics. So let's just go through, and we do have a test patient. George Jones, you can see the diagnosis information, educational material. And you might want to clear up the margins in the middle to make the paper look cleaner, but here's all the information. I'm going to stop before going any further if there are any questions, Julie or anybody who's been monitoring for questions.
Actually, it looks pretty good. I don't have anything popping up right now.
Okay, so I hope so far this has been pretty straightforward. All we've really done is put one field in there. And that's one of the great things about the way that this encounter chart works is we don't have to pull over all these individual pieces of information. This summary in the chart brings it all for us and formats it in a pretty nice way. It's going to jump to the end of the report and make sure. Oh, there's a nice one. You can see there's a lot of information on here. So that's going to be our basic encounter report. Of course, we added that one search in there. You can add as many other searches as you want if you wanted to only include certain patients. If you wanted to have the date, for example, you could have a certain encounter date. Put search criteria like you would for any other one. And now we've already got a pretty useful report where we can tone down the encounters we've made and print out summaries.
Okay, it looks like we do have one question here, Bill.
Sure, what's up?
Okay, Tina is asking if we wanted to import the plan on the encounter. Tina, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. So,
okay, do you want to clarify?
Right. Hi, Bill. This client that I recently implemented, they wanted, basically the flow was the doctor did the portion of his encounter note, the first part he did was the plan, because that was the patient instructions, right? So that patient can walk out the door. So he wanted to extract that information from that template that he just dictated into, stuck it into his encounter summary, they printed it out, and then later on he'd go back and do the rest of the encounter. So what I'd like to be, and I think that's going to happen over and over again. So what I'd like to be able to do is extract just that portion of a template real quick into a report, so that will be the patient instructions per se. Because they don't want to know the exam, and providers don't want to give the exam to the patient, you know.
Tina, before Bill answers that, there's one thing to note, is that there's two ways that this can be implemented. One is if you are using the plan template section of the encounter, Bill has a very easy way to do that. If, I believe, like in this client's case, the plan is a part of the subjective objective, it's a lot more complex. He still can show how to do that, but it is definitely a more complex process.
So it's funny you ask that, because the second report we are going to build is called How to Bring an Encounter If You Only Have a Plan. So we're going to walk through specifically how to do that. But Jared is absolutely right. If it's integrated into the other parts, it gets a little trickier. But if you're just looking to bring the summary for those who have the plan, it's actually pretty simple.
And going forwards, you know, knowing that I can do, or, you know, I guess all us implementers can do that, we'll just tell them you've got to do it under the plan. So, you know, that's not a problem, but if you can show us,
I'm going to show you right now. So let's just go in. Let's save this report right now. And I'm going to close it. I'm going to go over to the encounters for just a second. It's going to open up one randomly here. So you're all familiar. You have the subjective objective, the assessment, the plan, which you're concerned with, the notes and review, the orders, and the additional coding. Now, each of these tabs is connected to the encounter in its own way. And they're numbered. It's easy to remember. They just start 0 and go left to right. So, and I'll say where this number applies, but knowing that this number exists is helpful right now. Subjective objective is 0, assessment is 1, plan is 2, so we'll be concerned with 2 today. Notes and review is 3, orders is 4, and additional coding, I believe, is 5. I would have to double check that one, but logically that makes sense. So going back over to our encounter here, if we do a quick search, we're going to see there are about 30 encounters here. So what we're going to do right now is, and if any of you have those maps that we looked at last week, and I believe were sent to you as attachments, you're going to see the connection of all the tables there. So what we're going to do is, before we weren't concerned with the answers of the reports at all. We just concerned that the encounters existed. But if we only want to include the plans, we're going to connect the answers here. Get rid of these. So the encounter ID, we're going to connect to the encounter ID here. Left outer again. Oops. And now that we've done that over in search, grid is saying which section of answers we're looking for, the subjective, objective, the labs, etc. So we're saying we're only concerned now with encounters that have that plan and ignore the other ones. So we're going to add to the search criteria where the grid is equal to 2 because we said 2 is plan. If you put 0 in here, it would just do the subjective objectives. Plan is, I agree with you, almost everybody's going to be concerned with the plan if they're printing it out, giving it to customers a lot more than the other sections of it. Let's go ahead and hit OK. So now we're going to come over here. And I haven't checked this database, so it's possible that every encounter already has a plan. But if any of them, you know, were not the plan, or the other ones, they're not going to show up. It's just going to show, it's going to look the same, but it's just going to bring up those patients with the plan information. So that's how you can limit it down there and have things immediately when you're on the plan without having to worry about the rest of the encounter. And again, visually it's going to look the same. You can tweak a little bit the patient information, everything in here. This summary is going to look the same because that's a unified field, but that's going to connect it to the plans. I know I kind of rushed through that, and a lot of it was just sort of memorization parts, but I hope the logic of it kind of made sense to everyone.
Yeah, and are you going to show us how to run that on the front end?
Oh, absolutely.
Thanks.
So let's go ahead and just save this one as encounter list with plan, not with plab. So Jared, having modified the interface, may be able to tell us additional places where we can do this, but the most immediately available place we're going to be able to do this is right from the encounter list. We can go ahead and run it here and say, I can say, I only want to run it for patients whose last name starts with A through M. I don't know why you would do that. If I wanted to enter encounter date or any other search criteria I put in there, I'm going to leave that blank right now. And then I can just run it right from the report list and then print it if I choose to. So any reports we create with the encounter list are going to show up right in the encounter list. Jared, is there any other place where encounter reports will show up if we set the properties? And if so, what would those properties need to be set to?
And that's a really good question, Bill, because I was going to say, okay, so let's think of the flow here from the client perspective. You know, they're either in the scheduler or somewhere, but not necessarily in this screen, and they need to know the patient's seen the doctor and the patient's now going out. They don't necessarily know that patient name from, you know, they'd have to have that schedule in front of them to see which patient that is, right?
Again, well, and again, you can put in any search criteria you want. So Jared will answer in just a moment where are the other places we can run this from, including from the patient information. But if you only want to run it from a certain date, we can modify those as well. Jared, what things could we do? We could certainly print these as a statement if we wanted to, but what are some other places, if any? And I'll show you how to run it from the patient list.
Just from the report section. Just from the report section.
Okay. Okay. So the only other thing you could do there would be within limits from the patient information. There's these patient information sheets, and if you talk to someone in support, or if you want to go ahead and learn the properties of these individual options, you can match your encounter report to show up in the list. So for example, we could add it to these lists here by changing the properties of the individual report to show up in these lists. I wouldn't recommend putting that in a statement, for example, because when you hit it, it's going to send a lot of financial information that's going to confuse the report. But you could definitely put it in patient information if you wanted to do it there. So are there any other questions on that? Okay.
Did that take care of it for you?
For me?
Yeah. Did you get your question?
Yeah, I think, you know, if we can run it from that patient information screen, that will be important, at least because they can, I mean, most of the things sort of pinnacles off of that scheduler from what I can see. You know, that's when they check out, and, you know, it would be nice if we had a right-click option there and run the report or whatever.
Sure. And Tina, that's not specific to encounter reports. Any report, as long as you, test this because, certain ones have had certain criteria. In the report properties right here, I'm going to show you. For any report, you're going to have your category and your report type. Now, the primary purpose of those is just to see where they're listed in your report list. But the secondary purpose is any ones that match certain criteria are going to show up in those buttons. For example, this is not a super bill, but if I could set the options to super bill here, and then when you say print super bill, it would show up as a list of things there. So if there's a button that you like, find a report that matches that, look at its properties, set the report type and the category to match that other report, and it will show up in that same option there. Use a little bit of caution there because you don't want to be sending the wrong information report. It might crash the report, which is not the worst thing in the world. You just lose 5 seconds of your time. But yeah, you can set the properties and the report type and the category here to match any of those side buttons in any part of the program. And that's true of any report in your system.
I'll play with it.
So that's,
Thank you.
Absolutely. So that's the bulk of the basic encounter summary information. The biggest thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to be changing around your search criteria to match what you want. You're going to play with your formatting to make it look a little bit. We have created this one for this other practice that I'm going to share here, where it prints it in 3 columns instead of 1 because that's aesthetically a little bit more pleasing for some people. But it's almost identical to the report we just built today. We just played around with the general report parameters to set it up in columns instead of as a full stand. They added some extra header information. But aside from that, this report we built for West Virginia is essentially the report we just built today with a couple of visual tweaks. So I think that's going to help you build most of the encounter reports you're going to need in the basics right now. And the customization from that point is the same as non-encounter customization. So I hope that was helpful. Julie, any other things you need from me?
No, it looks like we don't have any other questions. If we can give it just a second in case anybody thinks of anything, I think that that has pretty much covered it.
Okay, so we'll do each one in a separate order then. So
it looks like we're pretty much clear on questions after Tina. So Jared, is there anything else you want to add for today's session or anything else you think we should cover?
No, not right now.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to be available for the next 10 minutes or so just in case we have other late questions that come in. Otherwise, we'll end a little bit early today. Today's session is recorded, and I'm going to post it in the centralized location so that you can access that afterwards. Again, take a look at the homework, and if you have any questions about the report building to today, let us know, and if I need to set up time with Bill to work a little bit more one-on-one, we'll see if we can get that arranged. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance today, and again, we'll be around for the next few minutes or so just to answer questions if any come in. Thank you.
Bye.